Hi everybody, it's Miguel again. So we've already talked about the science behind COVID-19, and today I want to shift gears to talk about some of the public health concerns surrounding this virus. There's a lot of questions out there about what the media is stating, some online sources from World Health Organization, CDC, even our own Flint community has some questions. And so in this video, I want to talk about some of those burning questions that we have and hopefully shed some light on and explain some things that we've all been hearing. So I went around and asked a bunch of people, what are some things that you are still unsure about COVID-19? They wrote them down and they put them in this box, and so today I'm going to answer some of those questions for you today. So one of the first questions that were asked was, where did this come from? And that's an important question. Researchers have found that COVID-19, the disease, came from the virus SARS-CoV-2, which is had a very similar track record as two respiratory diseases we've seen in the past, MERS and SARS. So those two viruses originated from bats, and it's a respiratory disease that causes similar symptoms. And so the virus likes to replicate a lot in the host species, and replication is not necessarily a perfect thing. I mean, when you look at a factory, is the product going to look the same every single time? Yes, but sometimes there's a tiny little detail change. Well, those tiny little detail changes in the coronavirus allows it to then have the ability to potentially transmit itself to a new species. So in these two particular examples, they actually had the ability to jump to a secondary species. In MERS, it was camels, and in SARS, it was the Palm Civet. And so essentially what happens was, again, the virus had the ability to just tweak itself a little bit and then move on to humans. We like to call that a zoonotic disease, basically a disease that originated from an animal source. And so in the province of Wuhan, China, the cases that were around the starting point of the coronavirus came from live animal markets. And so when you work with animals really closely with these diseases, you run the risk of potentially getting a disease from them. Mind you, there's a lot of factors that go into that, but scientists believe that that is how the coronavirus was able to make its leap to the human hosts where it is now. So the next question is, what is the curve that everyone is talking about? That's actually a great question. So the curve that is being talked about in every single source you hear about coronavirus is this idea that there is the number of cases over the period of time. And so when we look at diseases, we see this imaginary predicted curve through statistics that a lot of epidemiologists do that determines how quickly people are going to become infected with the virus and how it's going to level itself out. And so they developed this distribution curve for the disease. And so public health officials want that curve to go down, meaning that the number of cases that people are infected is steady and not too significant to overwhelm the resources of hospitals and other people who are trying to prevent it over a period of time. So instead of a curve that's going to look like this, public health officials want a curve that looks like that. And so those curves are important because they help us make predictions of how this particular virus is going to infect individuals. So we use real-time data of people being tested for coronavirus to kind of make these accurate predictions. And so we then present those numbers to hospitals and other health officials, and so they're able to make informed decisions on how we should approach this disease. And so to flatten the curve, even Michigan, we've implemented a stay-at-home order, and we have strict social distancing guidelines, and people can wear personal protection equipment that is deemed appropriate by health authorities. And if we continue to practice those ideas and behaviors, then we in turn can lower the amount of people who are getting infected, and we can be able to have a better idea or control of this potential virus. So another question that is being asked is, if I can find it, who gets COVID-19? Well, there isn't an answer to who particularly gets COVID-19, but researchers and public health officials have kind of developed a idea or a criteria for people who could be affected. So anybody who has a potential compromised immune system can be vulnerable for the virus. Individuals that have respiratory diseases already, like COPD or emphysema, they could be potentially high risk for getting the virus. Researchers have seen people with heart disease to diabetes being a potential risk factor. Individuals who are older pose the risk of potentially getting the virus. People who are smokers or vapors, those individuals could potentially be more at risk. There's a lot of factors that go into a person's ability to get the virus, and there's no correct criteria. Every individual is different. Just because one person checks all the boxes doesn't mean they're necessarily going to get it, but they should still be mindful that they are a higher risk individual for getting this virus. So they still need to be practicing good social distancing, good personal hygiene, washing their hands, staying at home. And so health authorities put those guidelines out, and if you meet those guidelines, then you know that you could be a potential candidate for getting this virus. So you need to start implementing good, healthy ways to not